But that's why it's very important to remember that we're animals. Because when we see ourselves as animals, we understand what the animal needs. Hey guys, welcome back to Madness in Nigeria Living, and I'm your host, Gisi. Today I'll be talking about the human condition, more specifically, the human condition in today's day and age. I think it's no surprise really that a lot of people are suffering from loneliness. Same way, it's really no surprise that more people are getting anxious about the future, more people are getting depressed. But why is this a thing? And better still, is there any way we can navigate it? I think this is a thought process that a lot of people are beginning to see the severity of it, because research has shown that people that are lonely are 20% more likely to fall sick. But why are we lonely? I remember when I was growing up here, me and my siblings, we used to share the same room. There were a lot of common areas in the house. And when we were not in the house, we had the liberty to go outside to play. There was a sense of community in the streets. Even though the environment there was nowhere as safe as where I live now, or there was a sense of community. You see the adults talking to other adults. That is how I believe humans evolved. We evolved to be part of communities. And every day moving forward, especially since COVID, we have stripped away the community from our life bit by bit. And we're seeing the repercussions right now. How severe it might be is something we have to look back to see, but for now, it's a concern, and it's a rising concern among Nigerians. We are the community. We always had our community. It might have been our extended family, but we have stripped away the need for the extended family. And sometimes it's not even the individual. Most times, actually, it's not the individual decision. It's a structural decision. So one of the structural decisions that has led to this loneliness is the way our houses are built now. Our houses are built in a way that removes the need for community. If you are living in a gated estate, the gated estate has one or two setups. The individual compounds in the estate that are fenced around, or the shared boundaries that might be separated by little flowers. Both estates here create an idea of me versus my neighbor, and this is how it does it. First of all, there's no common area in most estates. They don't really create common areas, at least in Lagos, Nigeria. Let me not be overly general. They don't create common areas for kids to hang at. They don't create common areas for adults to hang at. And when you strip away that from the life of people, people generally feel more and more isolated. We now live in buildings where we feel more isolated. Even in the house, if you are sharing your house with your family members in a shared apartment, you have your individual rooms that isolate you. When you are in that room, you're in a different world, a zone of your own. The need for privacy is a very important human right, but at the same time, our need for privacy, as ironic as it is making us lonelier. Which is it a good trade-off? That's like the thought process. Is it really a good trade-off? Our privacy for our well-being. It's easy to want to think about the need for privacy, but I am getting more and more skeptical about the idea of privacy because of what we do online. We share so much data online. If we care about privacy that much, we wouldn't give away our data that much. So I don't think privacy is really what we want to trade off for a sense of community. But attacking privacy is unfair, because that's not the only reason as to why we don't have community. We all need a means to express ourselves outside of our individual self. I know that sounds bogus, but let me break it down. When we were growing up here, if you were in churches, if you were in mosques, you had that community of the church, one, and also had that activity, the activity you have to do. Now, the institutions like the churches and the rest have started failing the younger generations and the young adults that are beginning to find their way, that for the first time they have left their parents' house. These institutions, first of all, don't fill up that hole anymore. Those shared activities, it now feels like those shared activities are more of chores to gather money and less about for the service of other people. And because it feels less about the service of other people, people are now getting less involved in those kind of services. And when they are less involved, they ultimately feel less connected. We need to be connected to something greater than ourselves. That is an undeniable fact. And what that thing is dependent on everybody. Everybody have their own faiths and belief. But that need for something greater than ourselves is ingrained in the human animal. It's so funny that as human beings here, we have gotten... Okay, this is hands down one of my favorite lines from a rapper. Andrew K said, "When did we get so sophisticated and smart and trying so hard that we forgot that we were animals?" When did we forget that we were animals? Because if we pay attention to our animality, we see the need for social connection, we see the need for shared meat, shared stories. But every day we strip away that from ourselves. And another structural system that causes that stripping away is our work, it's our capitalism. Capitalism has made it, especially with the inflation rate, has made it so difficult for us to want to socialize, because socializing is expensive. And all these things are making us feel more lonely. Then to make matter worse, what we were supposed to use to make it cheaper to socialize, to connect to people, became everything else but that. Let's say you want to make a 4-hour call. If you wanted to make a 4-hour call, let's say about 6 years ago, 7 years ago, you are using your airtime to make that call. That will cost you nothing less than 5,000 to 10,000. Yeah, making that call is very expensive, and a lot of people will not want to embark on that. And there were even plans like midnight calls that people were using to do those type of calls. But now, who have the internet, who have WhatsApp, a 4-hour WhatsApp call will be lesser than 100 MB. An 100 MB subscription would be like 50 naira to do. So, in theory, we should be able to connect better. In reality, we don't. And it's because we are more distracted. We are bombarded, with a lot of information. A lot of ways the algorithm makes us distracted through rage, there are a lot of ways. And because of that constant bombardment, we don't even notice we communicate less to people we know. We stop trying to be intentional in growing friendship. Yeah, it's good to test people, it's good to chat, but even with the chatting, we rarely chat. Because we are always online, we find no need, there's no urgency to reply messages. And communication works better in person, because when you are talking, the person is replying real time, the person is listening real time. But if you send me a message and I reply you 2 hours later, you are less likely to be invested in that conversation. And all these things are part of why we feel more lonely. We put less effort in checking up on others. We put less effort in calling and making calls. We put less effort in meeting people. And in one angle, it's really not our fault. A lot is going on. But that's why it's very important to remember that we're animals. Because when we see ourselves as animals, we understand what the animal needs. Information is very important, but excessive information is just noise. There's a reason our brain evolved to block out excessive information. If you step into a room and there's an air freshener in the room, you perceive it immediately. When the brain has concluded this air freshener is not a threat, it starts blocking out the smell, because that information is no longer needed. It's necessary to know when to take in and leave information. But these days, everything is in front of us. There's too many news, too many propaganda, too many things going on. And you can't help but feel overwhelmed and underwhelmed at the same time. That feeling of overwhelmed by the too many news, underwhelmed because you're not stimulated enough, or have gotten so used to that high stimulation, is why we feel stressed. It's also why we feel bored, ironically. Let me tell you what my Twitter feed has been like for the last 1 week. Come online on Twitter. I see a video of a young kid dancing. I see someone quote tweet that kid talking about how it's unethical to have your child on the internet like that. I see someone arguing about why don't you do that with your own child and stop talking about another person's child. And then I scroll. The next thing I see is pro P2B tweet, anti P2B tweet, pro Tinubu tweet, anti Tinubu tweet. Everything is me versus you, me versus you. And that me versus you also comes from the fact that we forgot that we were animals. We created intersubjective categories for ourselves. And the moment we created these categories, even though these categories were created to better express us as human beings, it inevitably created a situation wherein we have to tick in certain boxes to feel a part of a category. And when we don't, we automatically feel like outsiders and we see people in the category as against us. That tribal mindset is also part of the human animal, ironically. The tribal mindset is necessary for bonding, but when the tribal mindset is pushed overdrive because we have too many categories, too many bosses, and we no longer think in the nuances of it's always a spectrum, we are always going to feel some categories to a certain degree and feel others, and those different intersectionalities what makes us. We no longer see that, we see it as us versus them. Even within group of, let's say, a minority group that is supposed to better relate to each other because of the struggle, let's say class struggles, they're still less likely to do that because of our mindset, our overly tribalistic mindset that comes from creating these many categories. And the categories can be as absurd as being a Davido fan versus a Wizkid fan, a Yoruba person versus an Igbo person. It's just really everywhere. But do we need these categories? We need it to a certain degree. We need it if we want to quickly get information, but if we want to arrive at the truth, and if we want to arrive at an intimate connection to make us feel like we are part of something bigger, then sometimes it's best to remember that we are animals, and the animal need the interaction more. For social animals, interaction is very necessary. And that's why you see like most social group, one means of punishment is by secluding the outcast from the group for a certain degree of time, because it has a psychological toll on social animals, and it's not just a human thing. Go and make research on every social animals. And now we have created a situation where we are too focused on our categories that we find it difficult to just have conversations. Every conversation now feels like a propaganda. There's the court case in Abuja, little kids, and it turned to a propaganda almost immediately. It was never about the victims. You see a rape case, it turned to a propaganda, feminist versus misogynist, it turns to man versus woman, gender wars, and it's like, chill, we're just human beings. Or better still, we are animals, and as animals, we're supposed to connect. And one way to do that is think for the other person. Like, try to think the angle of the other person. This other person that feels your cause is against theirs, why do they feel that way? If we start to think in that light and start to find ways to communicate these differences, I generally believe we'll better connect, because at the end of the day, a lot of people are reactionary. We have gotten to a reactionary phase. You see atheists immediately react to tweets from Christians, from Muslims. We see Christians immediately react to tweets from agnostics and atheists. The same is true for every other category you create. But just remember that you are a human, you are an animal, and at the end of the day, all these categories will not fill up the purposes that a social network will create for you. And the social network doesn't have to be big. That's another problem social media created. We start seeing friendship as a number games. Let's get the most amount of friends. Let's get as many friends as possible, as opposed to a quality game. You just need 2-3 quality friends and everything becomes easy. And then the last thing about the human condition of right now, we are in a very twisted interview. Our whole life from birth to death now feels like an interview. Reason being, we have to create a perfect image that will look good for everybody else, and anything you do might be used against you in the future. There's no such thing as teenage stupidity anymore. If you tweet something that is ignorant and hateful, it might cost you your job 10 years from now. And that excessive performance is also what is causing the breakdown. It's also what's causing us to self-destruct. I just hope one day we look back at our correct experience and just smile in realizing we overcome it. But I'm pessimistic, and I don't think we will. I believe what will most likely happen is the reactionary phase will blow up as a bubble. Then a new form of myth or religion will come that will completely disregard the truth, create new intersubjective reality, and eventually we will be back here again. That is, if we don't destroy the planet before that. So, I'll see you again next week. This is a very done episode. Actually, this wasn't the idea I had for this week, but research for the other idea was a little bit longer, and just going through the internet, I started seeing more and more reaction, and it just felt like too much. So I decided, let me talk about it. Tell me your own thought on the human condition. What has it been like for you as a human animal for the past decade? And what do you think can be done to improve it? What do you think can be done to make us connect to something bigger that doesn't necessarily have to be religion, because not everybody is religious? But just leave your ideas down below in the comment section. Remember to like and subscribe. Thanks for coming. Bye.